Well, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird, and she warbles as she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo till the 4th day of July. Jack of diamonds, I knew you from old. You robbed my young virtue, lined my corsets with gold. My horses ain't broken, you can't make them stay. I feed them good laudanum, sip champagne all day. Well, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird, and she warbles as she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo till the 4th day of July. Gonna build me a log cabin on a mountain so high, so I can see Soapy in his pine box riding by. Oh, sometimes I wonder how women can love men, and sometimes I wonder why they come back again. Well, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird, and she warbles as she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo till the 4th day of July.
Thank you so much. Wild raucous applause inside. So this is Annie Bartholomew. Very welcome to Amplify Alaska.
Thanks so much for having me. Yngvil.
We're in JUNEAU.
We are the capital city.
Yeah,
where you
hanging out.
Territory.
Have you been hanging out here for a very long time? Always?
Almost my entire life. I finished college at UAF in Fairbanks and did some time at Humboldt State University in California and some study abroad things in Mexico.
Yeah.
But it's like once you get this place in your bones, you can't leave.
Yeah. No,
you just can't live anywhere else. I feel like JUNEAU's the more polished version of Fairbanks and
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I can't say anything. I'm not going to hold the cities up against each other in Alaska.
Why would you try?
You're right. Yeah, no, exactly. It's rainy and gray a lot of the time, but it's a very, very special place.
Overcast,
yes,
as we call it.
Yeah,
it's
overcast.
Like great fog.
And it's sunny if it doesn't rain.
And perfect lighting.
Yeah. It is. We have it beautifully here right now. We're upstairs at the Crystal Saloon in JUNEAU, which is a new place. And what I'm excited about is that you are about to come out. When we're talking about this, you're about to come out with your album, which I've known about for quite a few years. And I just want to hear everything about it because it's quite a unique thing. Can you just kind of guide us through what the topic is, or what's the name of the album, everything?
Yeah, it's my debut album. I've done some other recording projects, but this is my first album. Mm-hmm. It's called Sisters of Whitechapel. It's a collection of songs based on narratives of women who came north during the Klondike Gold Rush. Mm-hmm. A lot of hustlers, entrepreneurs, people who had to do what they did to survive. And I've just been really obsessed and kind of haunted by this history. It was all sparked by a tour at the Red Onion Saloon in Skagway, where my friends Taylor Vidic and Cameron Brockett were tour guides and cultural interpreters in this historic brothel and venue and now restaurant that they dress up in corsets and these outfits for tourists to come learn about this history in the past and in the present. I just thought they were stories, and then I started reading the books and just went, wow, this is incredible. There's so much we can learn from them, and I felt like music was the best way to share these stories and the emotional truth and reality of these working women who were so anonymous to protect themselves from the dangers of sex work and all of the other ways you can make money during that time.
Right. Yeah. And thank you. That's a wonderful introduction. It sort of draws everybody in to want to hear more about it, because the connection that you had to that topic, or what the world, I think, and a long period of history. I'm thinking, I haven't seen that, I haven't been to Skagway and experienced what you experienced there. So I'm thinking about a lot of other sort of historic reenactment type and museum type places and historic buildings with humans in them that are in costumes. And it's very often it seems like it's a sort of a contained box of history in the past. And you were hit in the face by something that felt really real, and that you wanted to get into, and you did it really thoroughly. You traveled around several places, and so and it became did you know right away? You said that I was going to do music, but was an album the idea? Did you have other ideas, or conceptually how you were going to kind of interpret your findings?
Well, I was first interested after the first Alaska Music Summit. You guys brought up Devin Leger, who's a really incredible musician and someone who helps artists really craft narratives. And he said, if you're not talking about Alaska or showcasing Alaska in a lot of your marketing materials or your story, it's a real wasted opportunity. And I'd always felt uncomfortable with artists who talk about Alaska and like carry the Alaska flag, because it feels very colonizer.
I remember you saying,
like,
this photograph of these white mountains is not what I think of Alaska, because I come from Southeast and we don't have snow. I remember you saying that back in like 2017.
Like, feels very resource extractive, but it just stuck with me. And I feel like things that kind of make me not feel right or bother me, usually there's like a question in there or something I have to unravel to get to. And I was like, okay, why don't I like these representations of Alaska? Yeah. Because they don't feel authentic to me. What feels authentic? And then I did this tour, and it just felt like the right story to be telling at the right time. It was after the Me Too movement. And I felt like the dialogue about sex work has been changing a lot, as well as like dialogue about labor and getting paid and emotional labor and women's work. So that's kind of how it started, was like, what is this Alaskan story that I want to tell? And it's such a huge story, it can't address, how Indigenous folks were affected by these outsiders coming in and stealing and disrupting. But it's one story that repeats itself in any resource extraction town, the booms and the busts, and then when it falls out and people go to the next place. So like in the Klondike Gold Rush, they all rushed off to Nome, and that was the end of it. And a lot of people came to JUNEAU as well, and so that's why we have a population here. But we live in the shadows of like the Treadwell gold mine in Douglas. So yeah, there was a lot there, and then it's just like the more I learned, the more I wanted to know. And as I was crafting the project, I got to go to Folk Alliance and met an artist named Willie Carlisle, who's a folk musician, but also does a lot of one-man shows. And I thought it was really interesting that, you can perform music in a bar, maybe in a coffee shop, but performing it at a theater, you automatically get an audience who wants to sit and be quiet and hear, and you can charge more for tickets. And the feedback I'd get from audiences is like, I want to hear more about this. And I was playing these shows where I would talk more in between the songs about the history than I was actually playing my instrument on stage. So the audience was eager to learn, and there were a lot of funding opportunities. I got to go to Whitehorse for a residency through the Yukon Arts Center and Jazz Yukon. And the
I'd love to hear
Film
more
Society.
what you found out in those different places. But what you just said was interesting, and I can see that this is the kind of topic that gives you an opportunity, or offers the obvious opportunity to turn it inside out, and it's not just the music as the end result, which very often is the case. But more and more I find, I don't know if you agree, that musicians on stage get time to talk more, maybe sometimes even like preach more, or really, that I think the audiences are looking for a little bit more than just the musical content and entertainment, or not entertainment, but the art experience of listening to music is now also enriched by us being allowed, and that for me personally too, I've always imagined that I would talk about the background for the piece, whether it was a personal piece or whether it's a political piece or anything like that, that you sort of create the world, that you bring your whole world with you.
Absolutely. And the audience is curious and they're smart and they want to find another way to connect to it.
Yeah, and I think you're the first person that we have with Amplify Alaska that's so clearly, in its sort of operating right now anyway, in the sort of historical realm. But before also, you had when I heard you sing before you work on this project, it's that sort of old style blues and you like the classic old style, the roots of everything. It's like, do you feel like that going back to the roots of the stuff is where the truth is, and then you take it from there, kind of thing? Or
yeah, I'm always interested in source recordings and trying to figure out, like you said, that truth or the emotion that was there. And the more I listen to like old time music, I've learned more that like that was another extractive process. You had these song catchers,
and do
like
you then
Alan Lomax or the Carter family, who are trying to get these artists, oftentimes artists of colors, to perform music in the style that they thought could sell records or that they wanted. But that's sometimes the best representation we have. So I'm always about trying to hear it and interpret it and make it a living tradition, Don't let it live entirely in the past, but bring it to this generation and to new audiences. And that's like some of the most important work you can do. So that first song I played was The Cuckoo, which is a traditional song, but I rewrote the verses to make it fit this story and this play. And 100 years ago, when people played that song, they would write their own regional variation of it based off of, like, I heard it at a barn dance and then I went home singing it and now I play with my friends. And this is how we do it. And each community had its own sound based off of things like the landscape, like certain areas that were in hollers or wooded or mountains are going to have a different sound from the cities where you have factories and people interacting. So there's just so much to do. And I wish I could play banjo all day long.
Which I want to come back to talking about your specific instrument. But you mentioned one thing about the original or the traditional song versus original material. So do you also then write these songs in the style of the traditional style, right? There's a combination of you interpreting and rewriting and kind of modernizing maybe or contextualizing old stuff, and then you're also writing without calling it appropriation, because we just talked about extraction, and you cannot appropriate back in history. People have all kinds of like derogatory names for historic material, like pastiche, or they do all these kind of things, right? And it seems very sort of, I never liked any of those things, because I've never played with anyone who didn't make material that was like something from before, that didn't 100% feel it and be behind it, right?
Yeah,
so
there's absolutely
you just
gimmicks.
Blend in with it. You love something, and then now you're making it, right? It's how you learn.
I'm a gal from JUNEAU, Alaska.
Yeah.
It is a mountain town, but it's not an Appalachia, not from North Carolina. A lot of my teachers are, but, I did a workshop on ballad singing with Texas Gladden's granddaughter and Anna and Elizabeth, and what she said is that, like, you should sing these songs. Texas would want you to sing these songs. Like, these songs were meant for everybody and to be enjoyed. And that's not true of every tradition and every song out there, but I feel like our mission is to spread this music and what they felt and carry it forward. And not every song is going to make that cut, and not every song has, and not every song needs to be remembered and performed. But it's up to us as artists to be curators and help folks understand a little more about this.
And so what songs made the cut to this album? What was the concept? What was the process there to pick material? And
the only traditional on it is The Cuckoo, and I just love that song. And then a lot of my writing has been informed by a North Carolina songwriter named Laurelyn Dossett, who does a lot of things with the Carolina Chocolate Drops. And she came to JUNEAU with Perseverance Theater to teach these children her music from her play with her co-writing partner called Bloody Blackbeard, which is a play about Blackbeard. And a lot of that story is set in North Carolina. So she would study a bunch of sea shanties and include all of these like old time fiddle tunes, because that would have been the music that would have been occurring at that time. So she writes music for plays and was the first person to say to me, like, you're not crazy, people do this. Because I felt like when I was telling people at the beginning in Alaska I wanted to do this, they're like, dream on, like there's no way you can do a play that has music. But at the same time, you know, like Hadestown was on Broadway, and you had Bruce Springsteen doing Springsteen on Broadway. Like Hamilton has been a wild success. So I feel like it's taken longer, or maybe it's just that Alaskan thing where it's like it doesn't exist, so you have to do it. And you'll get buy-in once everything. It's done.
Then people know it,
Absolutely.
But I also do feel that this is a place, not to derail too much, but just commenting on that. The experience is that, if it hasn't been done, you can definitely get it done here. At the same time, it is a little daunting because you are kind of on the frontier of doing something new. But you mentioned, and it seemed obvious, I hadn't thought about it, that of course it was after the Me Too movement, or at the height of a lot. And I've seen that so many social issues in the last few years that have come to the forefront, quite rightly so. And now there is an audience that's sort of educated, or the ears have been open to the frequency of women and sex workers, and all of that suddenly is like it's no longer maybe even so edgy or so strange or so weird. It's something that people are already familiar with, and you can bring another aspect of it maybe. And that's how it feels to me. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I feel like definitely my thinking and perspective on sex workers evolved during this time. You know, I wanted to believe one narrative that was all these women are victims, and that was actually perpetuated by a lot of them during that time, because it helped keep their work clandestine so they could charge more money. But that's only one side of the story, you know. And we can't know all of these women's stories. The play itself and the title track, Whitechapel Woman, is based off of a newspaper article that was written in the Klondike Nugget about a woman who loses all of her possessions on her way to Dawson City and gets rescued by the Tom's Madame. And we don't know if the story is true. There's probably elements of truth, but it was also written during the time of yellow journalism, which made all these people go north during this economic depression in the United States, and built Seattle. You know, Seattle probably wouldn't exist without these yellow papers and the outfitters. So huge event that affects so much of the world we live in today. And if I could just share a little part of it and open people's hearts and minds, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to do it. I'm going to go and research this now more after this interview.
Watch out. It's a dangerous
But here's the
path.
other thing, though, and you're talking about this and the women, how they were both, you know, you're partly victim, you're partly also an economic operator in a certain time. And there's something very ambiguous, right? And as also another part of thing I feel personally about your style and your singing, it has an ambiguity and sort of accepting of a broad range of possibilities. That might sound really vague and strange, but I think so. I think you kind of like allow for everything to be what it is. You're not necessarily putting things in boxes. You're not trying to say this is how it was, or I'm not. You know, there's not a big fanfare for one side or other, but giving the story, and then people will hear it and feel something. And that's obviously
it's
part of the job as your job as an artist.
It's been incredible. You know, I play these songs and I have something in mind, or I take part of my personal history and insert it into a song. Or in the play, when we were writing it, a lot of it came from historic texts, but a lot of it was parts of myself and my own observations. And your actors will interpret it a certain way, and the audience will interpret it a certain way. And a lot of things that you didn't write down, they'll find meaning from, and often it's deeper meaning than you intended.
And I want to talk to you a bit about the process of making the album, and really, and its concept. And it's also a play. You've written a play and an album, and they go together, or they're apart. I must say, it's like a box set with a play and an album.
Yeah. So
mental box set. Well,
absolutely.
Can you just talk about the process? What did you do? How did you finance it? How where did you go? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I started writing these songs probably like 5 years ago. And at that time, I really didn't play much banjo at all. But I knew that I wanted to play banjo. And here in Alaska, we have the Rasmussen Foundation and those annual artist awards. And I'd applied for 3 years for it with this specific project, 2 years for other ones. And the year that I changed my thinking, and I was just like, I'm going to ask them to pay for a banjo to be made for me to make this album. And it sounded really crazy, and I didn't expect them to say yes, but that's what made them say yes.
So this is the Rasmussen banjo?
This is the Rasmussen banjo.
Wow.
It was made by a guy
zoom in
named...
on this.
It was
It doesn't have a little logo for the foundation.
Yeah, I wish. Just carve it into the side.
Right. No, anyway, well, I want to hear more about the banjo, but then, the process.
Oh,
You got the grant, obviously, and the banjo became the voice of the project.
Yeah, so I had to learn how to play banjo. So I ended up going to ASCA for a career opportunity grant to go to New Mexico banjo camp because there is a player named Riley Bogus who collaborates a lot with Laura Lynn, the gal from North Carolina, as a songwriting duo. Well, I guess they're best friends. They play so much music together. I wanted to work with him. So I thought, like, the camp as far away from Appalachia as possible will probably have the fewest clawhammer banjo players. So I'm going to that one. And then COVID hit, so camp got canceled. But they let me do Zoom lessons with Riley, which has turned into this 1.5-year-long mentorship. So that's why I know all the cool licks. But also when you learn from someone who's a culture bearer, you internalize all of the stories. And a lot of working with him has made me question anybody who says, like, this is exactly the way that you play this song or this history, because it is very ambiguous. And, there are a lot of people who wanted to make a buck off of being the authority on a certain tradition or genre. So I started working with Riley, and then in the background, Theater Alaska, this new theater organization, offered this year-long playwriting workshop with some people I really admire from Perseverance Theater, Flordelino Lagundino and Frank Catas, to take Alaskans who were playwrights or never playwrights and teach them how to do this craft. And I just thought, like, when on earth am I going to have time to hang out at home and learn to write something? And immediately, Flor put me in the group of people who already had work written. So I just went, oh no, like, you've got this all wrong. I'm in the baby group, like, put me in the beginner one. And he's like, no, I think you have something. So I immediately called up my friend Willie Carlisle, who gave me, like, playwriting 101, and then started on this year process to write this play. I got a director named Heidi Hanselman from San Diego, who eventually came up to Alaska to help us produce it, but also helped me understand this art, because even though I've lived in Perseverance, lived in a town with a regional theater, Perseverance Theater, as an audience member, so many choices are over your head, and you're not really aware of any of the mechanics of playwriting. So to have people who are really experienced help guide me through this process was really amazing and changed it completely. But I was writing, I had most of the songs written, and usually you write the play and then the music, and you make the music make the play function. So to write a play to the music using all of this historic material, like, most of it I've, like, remixed for this time. So a lot of that writing is racist and not worth sharing. So trying to, a lot of times, edit it for a modern audience was a lot of the work. But then there's so much you have to cut. Like, so much of the process was just reading historic documents and deciding, like, this has, a sliver or a grain of something we can take to this bigger thing. And a lot of it's just, like, killing your babies and mourning what you can include or isn't right for an audience. So I also working on this play. Before the pandemic, I got to do this residency in Whitehorse and go to Dawson City and check out all the cold storage and the costumes. Well, they're not costumes. They were, like, literally corsets women wore.
They were just
artifacts.
What they wore, right? Yeah,
like,
pretty much.
It's pretty dreamy to just get to, like, I'm working on this play. You should let me come to your museum. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of that stuff, and people were so eager to help. Yeah. And so to have a big, ambitious project to hang your hat on, and it just opens a lot of doors. So I really benefited from that. But you also need people who are like, you have deadlines, Sandy. Like,
I was just going to say, I mean, it sounds like such a big, like a fan of projects at the same time. So you're writing a play, you're learning to play the instrument.
And meanwhile, have a producer who's like,
right, who's coming,
we need to record the album, Andy.
Right.
Like,
and then
when
you're
are we
thinking,
going to do that?
Yeah, and what am I going to, and how am I going to market it and all of that. So, but did you meet your deadlines, or did they get extended? Was COVID part of dragging it out, or was it actually helpful?
You know, we took an extra year
Yeah.
because we kept thinking it's going to be over. We can get a band together. We can rehearse it. And that didn't happen for us.
Right.
And then I originally thought I'd import a lot of my favorite studio musicians, but with the pandemic, it made more sense to use Alaskan artists. We got my producer, Justin Smith from Gustavus, to come in with all of this hundreds of pounds and thousands of dollars of recording equipment and tape mics. To come in and record it at a cabin here at the Methodist camp. So we turned it into a big studio. We all stayed out there for a week. There was no cell service. It was wonderful. It was hard work, and got it all recorded. And so it's been sitting there since last summer, just getting ready to put out. And I wanted to give myself enough time to do it right and create videos, because I wanted to continue to have a life. But it's been really hard to balance, like, okay, we have to work on the musical now, or like, okay, I
what
have
to do.
record.
I think it's really hard to know what to do the first time and the second time. And actually every time is the first time, because you're inspired, slightly blinded and inspired by the excitement of the project, right? And so it's good to have a team around you to work with, obviously. But yeah, that's just, it's such a process. And yeah, and if you come back and forth to the music, that's one question I had. Are you hearing things that you wish you had wanted to do again, or are you getting more happy
Yngvil,
or less
please.
happy? No,
have you
I'd
ever
say,
recorded a project that like you didn't?
Well, for me, I hate the project the first year. I absolutely hate everything the first year, and then I come back and listen. I don't take a break on purpose, but I listened to all my 3 albums in the car down to Homer the other week, and I was like, it's actually pretty good,
right?
You know, and I was like, oh, that was 10, 11 years ago, maybe time to do another one. It's such a relief that it wasn't as scrappy as I thought it was when I made it.
And we're always so critical of our work, and I think it's to the detriment of our collaborators. And I see it a lot in photography, where I'll take amazing portraits of musicians, and they hate it because their hair was doing a weird flippy thing, or they don't like that they were showing their teeth, and they like throw out all this amazing content instead of just being like, oh, that's okay, because the audience doesn't notice that stuff. So for me, giving it time helps me appreciate it more and appreciate my coworkers' performances on it.
And it takes out the noise. I think that's a big part. It takes out the noise. People that really don't talk, maybe, I don't think we should all do like self-help talks as musicians, but it's a portion.
Self-affirmation talks.
Portion of our production process is to have the positive and more objective view of the music that we're putting out, because it's a product that goes to a market, or it's a product that goes out to viewers and listeners, and we need to be aware of what they're going to see and hear to a certain extent, I think.
But I don't think they're as critical as we think they are, or we are of ourselves. And I'm really proud of the record. I'm also a way better banjo player now than I was then. So
that's the tricky part. You can
that's
hear
the tricky
things,
part. But it's like I get to save that for the audience when they see it. And then they just want to see you succeed. They just want to hear a cool album that sounds like Alaska. And I have to constantly remind myself of that. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be a moment in time, and you can still love it.
At this point, when we're sitting here in January in 2023, what do you know about the future for your project?
Oh, we absolutely want to take it on the road. There's a lot of communities. When I say on the road, we're in Southeast Alaska. You have to get here.
Go to the glacier and back. Go for it.
Yeah. You can ferry or fly here. And so getting out of JUNEAU is really expensive. And you have to think big. And I feel like that's been hard for me, because I always think too small. Like, we can't possibly charge this much for tickets. No one will come to the show. And like, lo and behold, we sell out the Crystal Saloon 2 nights in a row because we asked people to come to it. And So it takes a lot of budgeting, and that's not my strong suit. So having Theater Alaska to help us do it has been instrumental. Yeah, so I'm hoping to bring it later this summer or fall, or maybe in the shoulder season, to Anchorage. We absolutely want to go to Skagway and some of the places where this history occurred. The Yukon is a real natural fit. And then I'd love to tour mining communities in the lower 48 because a lot of them share this background and this story, and either it happened before the Klondike Gold Rush or after, or like is currently happening in like fracking communities with man camps, and the story just kind of keeps continuing and building, and we're living in the legacy and fallout from it.
Mm-hmm. Have you started reaching out to communities like that in the low 48 or?
Not yet. I'm so focused on getting the album out.
Yeah.
It's hard. I have to compartmentalize, and if you try to do everything, nothing gets done. Like there've been so many nights when I need to send emails instead, just get on like the Library of Congress newspaper collection, and it's just, there's so much out there. You could spend a lifetime. And that was another incredible piece of feedback, was just like, no more research, Annie. They like cut me off in like March. They're like, no more research.
No more input, only output.
Yeah, we just have to work with what we have.
And how long is the play, by the way? Let's talk a little bit about the play. How long is it? And I don't know, I should never ask. I am a theater person. I always think about how long is the play. I should ask, what's the play about? But how long is it?
It's an hour and 10 minutes.
Perfect length.
And it's like a lot of songs. That one of the best compliments I got from Frank Catast was just like how fast it moved and how...
And it's a cast of 3?
Yeah, 3 actors, and then we ended up turning Kat Moore into an actress.
Oh.
She plays the piano professor.
She has to be in the play.
Yeah, at one point she like breaks the fourth wall and starts acting. And actually, we have more actor performers. It's more like 5. But if it were my way, we would like have a real string band and actors. And I ended up having to act because one of our actors got sick during it, and that was illuminating because acting is very hard. And
you learn to play the band, you learn to write a play, and you learn to act.
It was, I need some more acting classes, but that was the thing. It's just like you have to rise to the occasion. Like that's what blew my mind about theater, is those people know how to improvise. Like I feel like we can improvise as musicians. How many times have you been thrown on stage, or you break a string, or you're just like, well, I don't know the words, but this is what we're going to get. And it's your job to make it feel natural. But theater people, like, they just go out there and they do it. And the audience has no idea how much.
Now I want to like do another hour on music/theater.
Sorry, I keep so many tangents.
It's very interesting.
But there's so much room for music in theater, and like theater and music.
Versa, So a word about stagecraft then, because what have you learned? This is just something that you now brought into the conversation I hadn't thought about. I think about it a lot because I have theater background and music background. I don't know it all, but for me, I love it when musicians get the difference and what you can do, and sort of are aware of themselves, and sort of almost transcending when you're sending the audiences into a different reality. Because what you just described for me was the difference between what music does and what theater does to the audience, and what the audience is expecting, right? You want to be totally enthralled when you're in a play. We talk about the contract with the audience of suspension of disbelief and, blah, blah, all of that, which is not blah, blah, but it is almost a cliche now, a professional cliche. So when you're listening to music, you're doing the opposite. You're opening your heart to a person. It's kind of like a different kind of truth coming in, whereas theater is also truth, but it's using a different mechanic. So I'm sure.
Absolutely. Like when I reinterpret songs, I don't have trouble expressing those emotions, but to take someone else's words and someone else's character, I found that very hard. I'm also naturally kind of awkward.
Right, so you need to play an awkward character or make that character awkward.
Yeah, and it was bad because I wrote all the characters and why I couldn't play, But it just shows how much training a lot of these actors had. We were really lucky in that we performed in a lot of unusual places. So we were at the Treadwell mining area here in JUNEAU in Douglas. So you were outside, you were in nature. We had these fabulous costumes designed by Deb O. So she had us rehearsing in corsets and like the full undergarments. And so having these really beautiful costumes. And I was really afraid that we'd get a costume designer who might like put us in costumes like, you know, the real buxom, corsety, you know, real imagined, but not really real. Like I wanted to show these women.
Hollywood Wild West.
Yeah, like
corsets. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. We like had a contract that was like, this is going to be more Deadwood than Disneyland. And Heidi, our director, was really key to making sure that it felt real, even though we are playing sex workers in the 1890s. We had a lot of talent that helped us.
I actually want to ask you, what was it like then I'm guessing there's some central characters that are women in the play and in your stories. What was it like for them? What is it you now know? What was it like to be, I don't know if I can say a typical sex worker woman, but a woman who was working in Skagway? What was the life like for her? What was her work day? What was her, or work night? What was her life like? And how was this her whole life? Was this kind of like a dip in, dip out? What can you sort of give an example of someone that you've researched and found out about?
Yeah, and the first thing I'll say is that it was an occupation, it was a job. It wasn't their life. It wasn't their identity. And I think in today's society, we kind of label someone a sex worker and forget that they could be a mother or somebody's daughter or sister or business worker. And it might have just been something they did once in a while, or it could have been used to slander them, or they could have just been a woman who had a lot of boyfriends and accepted a lot of gifts from men, because there were very few women for men. And in a lot of these boom towns, brothels were really welcomed and like even celebrated because it took care of this societal need, very normal human behavior. And then as the towns would get bigger and there'd be more money and families and churches, they would like push the sex workers out of there. In Dawson City, they moved them across the river, and there was a bridge you'd have to cross so people would see who was going over to Loustown. So if Leo Morgan...
Always a giveaway when you cross the bridge, right?
Leo Morgan, who wrote the Good Time Girls of Alaska book, who really inspired a lot of this project, told me I should call it Sisters of Loustown, not Sisters of Whitechapel, because Whitechapel was just one of the names for the red light district in Dawson City, but also other places. So there were total tiers of women engaged in sex work. And also at that time, like, musicians and actresses were considered part of the demi-monde, which was like the underworld. So at the top of this hierarchy, you had like the actresses. Below that were like the musicians. Madames were somewhere else, but they were like really respected. Sometimes you would get a loan from them or give them your possessions to protect them, because if you screwed over the madame, you weren't going to be able to have sex with anyone. So at the top of the tier, you had these more powerful groups. Below that probably would have been the sex workers who worked in brothels, where you would have a pretty long shift. I think it was like 6 p.m. to like bar close. So for hours, lots of customers. And then you had the independent contractors who were in the streets. At the bottom tier, you had women who would like carry around carpets on their back and perform tricks in the alleyways, but you didn't have the protection of someone who likely would have taken care of men who might have assaulted or hurt them, kind of like a bouncer character. But we don't know a lot of this history. It wasn't written down. Like in the state of Montana, a lot of that history has been destroyed on purpose because they don't want to remember all this stuff. So, you know, there were different kinds of sex work that occurred. And sometimes it was just a part-time thing, or it could be a survival thing, or it's your preferred occupation and that's what you wanted to do. And there were lots of women who like started in like Butte, Colorado, and then went to the next place and then the next place. So they're not a monolith. We can't know all their stories. And there's absolutely tragedy but there's also stories of hope and courage, and you can't tell all the stories, but you can challenge people's ideas about this history. So if you want to learn, The Good Time Girls of Alaska is a good book. Also, Klondike Women's another one. And then I use some historical texts from sex workers during the Victorian era. One from a gal who was in Dawson City and Nome, and another one from somebody in the lower 48, but also had been in BC. And it's just wild.
Yeah.
It's
And I think that
crazy.
for many people, I think an impression is that in Alaska, at that time, during the different gold rushes, women were really just there as prostitutes. That's not the case.
No.
And I said prostitutes and not sex workers because that's the word that people are still thinking of.
And folks use them
Yeah,
interchangeably.
yeah. And yeah, that was like you're saying, that it's very interesting that now I think also prostitution or sex work is tightly connected with in the people's mind who are not engaging in the work or not interfacing with them as customers as something that is has often to do with addiction and other criminal, if it is criminal behavior, or at least very, very undesirable behavior. But back then it was actually kind of a celebrated profession and necessary, like you say, socioeconomically necessary.
Fairbanks was one of the places where it was legal for a
Yeah.
long time. And
Yeah.
when they made it illegal and they made it difficult, they had all of these other issues of like sexually transmitted infections. And Dawson City was one of those places where it was so remote that they had some safety and insulation from some of the ills of prostitution.
So in a way you could say that it sounds like across Alaska and other of these mining towns that the sex workers are really contributing to the economy. They're almost with the base. It's like live, work, play in those days, right?
Yeah, and I think
Without them, nobody would stick it out for very long.
absolutely. And some of the gals, Maud Parrish, who was just one of the women whose story I was inspired by, she was from San Francisco, was involved in a bad marriage. She got kind of married as a business transaction for her family and tried to get divorced, and the judge told her she was too young. So she ran away to Alaska on a steamer thinking she'd just play music in the dance halls, and found she could make more money as a dance hall girl, which is where you would get paid per dance. And these women just had to dance all night long, just like polka after fiddle tune. You know, it was incredible. So you'd have to have all this stamina, and she just stayed for a year, got up her money, and then went to South America on the next adventure. So you had women who went there to go make money. You had women who go there to go like find a husband or strike it rich, or just people who wanted a great adventure, which is why I think a lot of people come to Alaska, because this legacy kind of continues. So they were instrumental in the economies of these places, and they did all kinds of different things.
Yeah, I think it's just so fantastic that you created this vehicle for revisiting, and for many people, myself included, definitely a first time real kind of delve into it. So I'm so looking forward to a lot of people learning more about this part, and also just the way we're going to experience it, because it's a new way of presenting this material.
Well, and there's so many good stories
Yeah.
that need to be told,
Yeah.
and music is just one way to connect with people, and we're surrounded by so much talent. And I think as musicians, it's so hard to find opportunities to share this in a way where an audience is receptive. And I just think Alaska is one of those places that's so ripe for more people doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, in the local history. So thank you for that. I want to hear a little bit about the Rasmussen banjo.
Oh, yeah.
So it's beautiful. You were tuning it up earlier, and I actually, I wasn't looking, but I thought, oh, there's a piano somewhere in the building, and it has this really, really big tone. And then you played a little bit more, and it was so soft. It was built.
Yeah, so
it looks
they're like
100 years old, but it's not.
I did ask him for something that might be real.
Is
in
it
the 1890s.
distressed?
No,
distressed?
it's not distressed at all.
No.
So a lot of the banjos in the old time or clawhammer tradition are still built by hand by one person. The bluegrass resonator style has this big metal thing on the back called a pot. This one is an open back banjo. And it was made by a banjo maker in Astoria named Brooks Maston. And it's got this really crazy piece of figured bird's eye maple neck blank.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty distinct.
there's like a 2-year wait at most banjo makers to get one made, but he was experimenting with this design and just had one for sale. I was crafting my application, so I want to know how much one might possibly cost, which is really scary to ask an artist how much their craft is. And he gave me a quote, and I was like, that is under budget. So I said, yes, please. And he just sent it to me. And then the pandemic hit, and all these people wanted to learn how to play banjos, and you couldn't get a banjo anywhere. So yeah, it's a little bit smaller than other banjos. That's what I also learned is because bluegrass got so popular after Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, a lot of people are playing the resonator bluegrass style, which is much longer usually and made for man hands. But there's an incredible tradition of women banjo players like Ola Belle Reed, Matoki Slaughter, that once it came in the mail, I was like, wow, this is finally my banjo. It fits me. It's got an 11-inch pot and a goat skin head. So I think this was a goat in Haiti at one point.
A Haiti goat. Okay.
Yes. And I was kind of conflicted about it, but it's I would feel weird to be like, oh no, I'm too good for the goat skin. And then I had someone who told me don't get a goat skin because they pop,
Oh, right.
Because it's a living, breathing kind of thing. The reason you have to tune banjos so much is because it's a diaphragm instrument. The bridge just rests on top of it. And so you change the tension on one string, you
it's
change
like a
them on all
drum skin
string.
and you can change
Absolutely.
it. Yeah. But it's not a vegan banjo.
It's not a vegan banjo. It's...
Well, I'd love to hear. Is it anything else that you want to say about it, or can we hear some more?
Yeah. I've been learning to play from Riley Bogus, who's a North Carolina banjo maker as well. And so a lot of my licks and perspective comes from him and that incredible mentorship that I got through the Alaska State Council on the Arts. So banjos are just crazy. It's it's a whole lifestyle. And once you get into it,
you can't stop because it's like a sound that just is there all the time.
Yeah, and there's so much to learn. And so...
No, I love it. Let's hear something.
So this one's called Whitechapel Woman. It's the title track.
Title track, yes.
Yeah. In 98, we were Yukon bound, 30 mile, she run aground. Dawson City, no work to be found. Only trouble in gold by the pound. I'm gonna lie, gonna cheat, gonna steal. I'm gonna fake all the things I can't feel. And when I meet my savior, honey, I will kneel and work this room till I get a better deal. And work this room till I get a better deal. Whitechapel woman, dance hall girl, I'll be your sweetheart if you give me a whirl. But ain't no man gonna buy off me, for a life is a wife to misery. For a life is a wife to misery. From the moment I did decide, I was bathed, I was baptized. Silk and lace be my disguise. I will suffer, I will rise. I'm gonna run, gonna float, gonna fly. I'm gonna swallow all the tears that I cry. And if you see me on the by and by, don't you call me by my name, lest I'll die. Don't you call me by my name, lest I'll die. Watch out, woman, this old girl, I'll be your sweetheart if you give me a whirl. There ain't no man gonna buy off me, for a wife is a life to misery. For a life is a wife to misery. Welcome to the demi-monde. Bienvenue à la demi-monde. Welcome to the demi-monde. Bienvenue à la demi-monde.
Annie Bartholomew, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Yngvil. It's such a dream to get to play these songs and share them with folks.
Good luck with the project, and we'll hear much more from this, I know.
Thanks so much for having me here today. If folks are interested in the production, Theater Alaska is the organization I'm working with, so just Google that. And I can't wait to keep growing this project and sharing it, and look forward to seeing you come this spring and summer up north in Anchorage.
Absolutely, and beyond, I'm sure.
Hey, this is Lisa from the Amplify Alaska team. We have a fundraising event coming up on May 20th, 2023 in JUNEAU, Alaska at the Crystal Saloon. And many of the artists that are interviewed this season are going to be showcased at the event. So check out more details at amplifyalaska.org, and thanks for listening.